Today's show is being brought to you by individual contributors through Patreon. Go to patreon.com/The Education Game to help support the show, and thanks so much. Okay, I've got a question for the Education Game fans out there. Have you ever heard a child say these words? I hate math, or I don't like math, or I wish math didn't exist. Anything like that. Today we're going to unpack that, and we're going to unpack it through the lens of problem solving, because mathematics is really just that. It's a way to solve problems. And so now I want to welcome you to the Education Game podcast. I am Matt Barnes.
Yeah, and some call him the Brown Hornet.
Scott, you got to say it the right way. Remember?
Oh, that's right. The Brown Hornet.
That's close. It's the Brown Hornet. But you keep working on it. We'll get there.
All right, and I'm Dr. Scott.
Dr. Scott is known as the White Shadow. And
yeah, we don't know. We don't really know whether this is funny or not, right?
It's funny to us, and this
it's funny to us.
And since we're the only ones listening, then yeah, that's all that matters. So anyway, this is the spot for parents who are looking for something much better in their child's education and learning. And it's high time for parents to get better at navigating, advocating, and negotiating a better learning journey for their child. And that's what we're going to do today. So today we've got a special guest. Once again, it's not just two old guys, one bald and one gray. We've got a math and problem-solving expert that's joining us. Scott, would you mind introducing Jen a little bit here while I bring her into the show?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thanks, Matt. This is Jen Mascheck, and she is a math specialist and coach at Houston A+ Challenge. And so to get us started today, Jen, I think our listeners would be interested in hearing some of your story, specifically how you sort of merged together your expertise in math, but also you're a parent of two kids. Mm-hmm. And so how do you deal with a lot of the math anxiety? I don't know whether your kids have had that.
No, they haven't.
The past.
They've never had it.
They haven't.
No way.
Never.
Not with Jen.
So it's all biological.
That's right.
Her
kids have never said they hate math.
They came from Jen. There is no math anxiety in those kids. But how do you kind of, like, when your kids are having some challenges with math, what are some strategies that you might use that are parent strategies and not necessarily math coach strategies?
Okay. Did you want me to talk a little bit about myself first?
Yes.
Let's do that first.
Oh.
Yeah.
So yes, I am a mom of two. I have two kids who come up through, public education. They are, 13 and 16 now. And they came I guess they were kind of learning alongside of me. I taught in the classroom, I taught for 10 years. And I taught middle school and high school math predominantly. But I was really fortunate enough to start off at a K-12 campus. And so when I was first beginning my teaching career, my principal was really powerful. And she, on my off period, required me to go often to work with younger learners in a Montessori environment, like K-5, K-6. And so the way that Maria Montessori actually visualized mathematics and encouraged problem solvers and encouraged independent learners was really powerful for me as an educator. And so I did that for.
Let me pause you for a second. I'm sorry to interrupt your story, but I don't know if a lot of parents understand what Montessori actually is. Can you give a quick 2-second overview of that, if you're able, or Scott?
Maria Montessori she's an Italian educator, and she had a very specific way of thinking about learning for her students. And it was really powerful, and she saw great results. And so a lot of people study her methodologies for teaching in younger grades. So there's a lot of visuals. She did a lot of work with hands-on and concrete manipulatives, things that you can really touch and see and feel. for learners.
Learning through discovery, Matt.
Right, right.
So Montessori
Yeah.
was a big advocate, and it really merged right in with the American movement in the early 20th century, the progressive movement led by John Dewey. And so there was a mind melt, between Montessori and the Deweyians.
Got it. All right, we're down way into the weeds, but
We're
I just
in
want to
the
make
weeds now, yeah.
yeah. So we understand Montessori now. Jen, go back to you.
It's a really concrete and visual way of understanding why you compute numbers.
Gotcha.
It's very powerful for learning.
Cool.
And a lot of the standards, the new Common Core, and also I'm here in Texas, and so Texas has their own set of standards, and they've kind of molded the standards around really understanding the math instead of step 1, step 2, step 3.
Got it. So continue your story about you.
Yeah. Well, I did that. I taught there and worked with the middle school and high school students for about 10 years. And then I got recruited to work with Houston's independent school district. They had like a new coaching initiative, and they were looking for experienced teachers. And that's actually where I started coaching and working with teachers. So professional development of teachers. So the next generation, leading the newest generation into education. Coaching teachers inside their classrooms. So providing embedded professional development inside their classrooms. So like if you were to go and learn something new, you may or may not apply it, as quickly as if you had a coach, somebody to come in and work with you inside of your classroom. And so like we provide professional development, and then we actually go in and coach teachers inside their classrooms and work with their particular students.
Nice.
So it's been a really powerful model.
So this is what we really know, Jen. What kind of mom of math are you? So for those two kids, the mom of math.
I turned most of it. I feel like I turned most of it into games to help my kids understand math. But they didn't really know they were doing math while they were doing it, because they know their mom's a math teacher. And I didn't want them to think that I was judging them in their math abilities. And so we just played a bunch of games. Like things that like a lot of kids don't play anymore.
Like
spades.
what?
Yeah, like
spades.
what? Yeah.
Like spades, hearts.
So what?
Just
So what do cards? Those are all card games. So from a math perspective, what does playing cards do for kids' mathematical and problem-solving abilities?
Okay, do you know how to play spades?
I've never played spades. No,
I played a little.
I played hearts. I played hearts.
Well, there's a trump card. Like the spades are a trump, and so like while you're playing, it's very beneficial if you can count how many spades have already been played. So you know how many trump cards there are left.
Got it.
And it's really powerful if you can remember which spades have been played. So if you have the highest trump left.
I see.
So
I see.
if you have the ace of spades, then you know that you're going to win that particular hand of cards.
Got it.
And so, but it's also really powerful for things later, like probability. When they start, when you start trying to understand how likely is something, a lot of teachers in classrooms, they use cards and dice in order to explain probabilities. But if you've never played cards, then that would be a really difficult context for you to understand.
So what I'm hearing, Jen, is that in order to raise really good math students, you need to teach them how to gamble. That's what I'm hearing, right? So Vegas, there must be some really good math kids in Las Vegas, because gambling mecca
There
of
is.
the world.
We're not allowed to teach that in school, but when I do it with adults,
at home,
just so long as there's no money involved.
That's right. At home, you can do it.
No money.
I think the school districts. Would frown on you teaching students how to throw bones or roll dice.
Yeah.
In
craps tables.
Oh my goodness,
All
that
right.
would be fun though. And however, I will tell you that that is the fastest way to engage adult learners in probability, is to teach them how to gamble. Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
So when we do it in professional development, I'm like, look, guys, if you don't know how to play cards, you got to learn how to play cards.
Okay, I'm going to make my first note is that I'm going to need to teach my children how to play craps and how to shoot dice. Okay, let's continue on. Scott, you had some questions for Jen, I think, or Jen, were you done with your kind of intro of yourself?
Yeah. I think the last thing was that I've been coaching now for 11. This is my 12th year, so
Nice.
Lots of different personalities, lots of working with parents and teachers on how to not have kids say, I really don't like math. I can't do math.
Yes.
Yeah. The goal is really to have no people at cocktail parties say, I'm not good at math.
Nice.
That's really
nice.
cool.
All right, Scott.
So, Jen, let's talk a little bit about this group. They're called the National Council for the Teachers of Mathematics, and they put out some process standards a while back that I think if you can help parents make sense of these and maybe talk at a parent level about what it means and maybe what parents could do to support these types of process skills in their kids, I think that would be very helpful. You ready to play the game a little bit? All right, so I'm just going to throw one out at you.
Okay.
And you just like think like you're talking to a group of parents, sort of defining it, deciphering it, and then giving them some pointers, right? So here's the first one. Problem solving.
Sure. Okay. Well, I think what they mean by, and they have a very specific list. So the National Council of the Teachers of Mathematics is math teachers all over the country who have come together, who have been practicing working with students in their classrooms over the last 100 years. And they've come up with some things that not only would they like for you to see, they definitely want you to understand the math. And when I say math, I mean the algebra, the geometry, the numbers. But there's a process in which all of that is learned, in which they would really like also for students to have, and being a problem solver is one of them. And what that means is they want to encourage habits of persistence. They want to encourage habits of curiosity, right? One question leads you to another. And that curiosity is how people become lifelong lovers of learning. That curiosity, I want to know how to do this. I want to know how to explain this better. And then also they specifically talk about confidence in unfamiliar situations. So if I gave you a problem, not just a math problem, but any problem, and you wanted to solve it, are you confident that you know something, right? And I definitely have something to offer. I don't even know what it is yet, but I definitely have something. And they really want, children to have that as well. And so, there's some really specific things that when I tutor young learners, and by young, I mean K-12, when I tutor young learners, I always invite parents to come in to the sessions with me. And what I ask them to listen for are things like the language that I'm using when students, in order to encourage them to be problem solvers. So persistent and curious over time. And I could even send it to you. They have, there's some really specific phrases that I've acquired over time that parents can use at home when students are doing any task.
Can you give us
give us a couple?
Yeah. So for example, when I'm working with a student and they are struggling, but they are really trying hard. So there's there's significant effort. You can see it. The kids are really thinking. And so it's okay. So one of the things that we try and encourage with parents is, well, you don't know it. You're just not there yet. So yet's a really big word that I want to encourage parents to have in their vocabulary. You're going to get there. You're just not there yet. So like in the problem, like they said, encouraging persistence.
Yeah.
And that's actually in the Common Core State Standards, right? Is they want to encourage persistence and resilience. And that's kind of where it came from, right?
Nice.
Is I'm there, but I'm not there yet, right? Or like when you think you can't do this, remind your students you just can't do it yet, right?
Yeah.
Well,
so
and
Matt and I think that the grade F should be changed to NY.
Not yet.
Yeah.
Not yet.
What do you think about that?
Really powerful. I think that it's in process, right? Like you don't have it, but you're going to have it. You just don't have it right now.
Yeah.
Well, also some things like, especially at the middle of a tutoring session or a middle of a session with a student, it would be like, look how much progress you've made. So like noticing little things in student work are huge because they don't see it themselves. So like at the very beginning of today, you couldn't do, like for a very young learner, at the very beginning of the day, you couldn't recognize that was a double. But look, now all of the times that I'm asking you if it's a double or not, now you recognize that it's a double. Yeah. So tomorrow we'll go more, we'll do more, right?
But recognizing the small steps, right?
Yes.
Recognizing the small steps.
Yeah, and I think that's really huge for parents too. Like you can do it. Like don't stop here. There's something that you know, or I really admire your persistence. Right?
This is really good.
That I can keep doing. And I'll send you actually mindsetworks.com. They have a bunch of free resources, and they have a sheet like if your student's struggling with strong efforts, say this. If they need help with the strategies, to say this.
Awesome. What is it? Mindsetworks.com.
Mindsetworks.com.
Got it.
Nice.
Awesome.
Yeah, you should definitely put a link in the resources, and I'll send you the PDF if you want.
Please.
Yeah, that'd be great. Okay, here's a couple more.
But I want to say this one last thing too. There are also times when the students succeed with very little effort. So like often we forget about the young learners who like know everything. I'm like, well, like when students succeed really easily without effort, I'm like, well, it's great that you have that down. I need to find something more challenging for you.
Nice.
This is too easy. You shouldn't know everything. If you never make a mistake or if you never fail, then you're not really learning anything. That's something you already knew. So let me find something a little more challenging for you.
So just as an aside, Scott, we're going to have to do a show on grades because what Jen just talked through was the negatives on both sides of grades, like the kids who get an A without working hard. There's a problem there, just like the kid who works really, really hard and gets a D or an F, right? Both of those, there's an adjustment that doesn't correspond to grades. So we'll take that another time. But Scott, back to you.
Yeah, so I'm just going to throw out like another two, just to kind of see what you have to say. So they talk about a process skill known as reasoning and proof. And then they also talk about a process skill around communications.
Okay.
So makes sense for parents when they talk about reasoning and proof and communications from a math perspective. What are they talking about?
Well, I think a high school teacher would tell you that proofs are in geometry and in algebra, and they're specific to mathematics, and what they're doing is, they're using a logical reasoning to show you that a generalization always works. And it always works because if I can replace the numbers with letters, then that would be proof that it would always work. I feel like for parents, that reasoning and proof is by what NCTM calls exploring phenomena. and justifying your results. So meaning like, kind of like the scientific method, like you have a very specific conjecture and then you test it and then it fails or it succeeds and then you prove your hypothesis or you don't, right? But for learners, I feel like math for reasoning and especially for reasoning, does the math make sense? Like math is supposed to make sense. This is a human construct that we've developed in order to make sense of things. So if the math doesn't make sense, right, that's the reasoning piece, right? This is supposed to make sense. I'm supposed to be able to reason why, this works.
Usually in movies, and when the math doesn't make sense, things start blowing up.
Yeah, right? Or falling down.
Bad things
buildings
happen.
Fall down.
Right.
And then but the proof is, especially with math learners, is how do you know you're right? And for me, like the most powerful thing that I say to parents and kids is, life doesn't have an answer key. That answer key that's in the back of your book or it's on the internet, like those math answers were generated by a human. How did they know they were right? And so, some of the things we want to encourage, are, multiple ways to get the same answers so that you can verify your results. So I feel like, for parents and kids learning, it's really about working through situations, reasoning, like having a logical sense of if this, then that, and then being able to justify that, that you're right.
So are there other questions, Jen, like you said before, that a parent can be armed with so that they can begin to confirm that their children actually understand math and aren't just cranking the wheel to complete the problem?
Sure. Well, I think how do you know you're right is a really good one.
Good.
Like, how do you know? Well, just how do you know? And so this is really specific though. Not being able so this is a little different, and a parent may not know, but when your student, you don't want them to explain how they did it. That's just regurgitating like the steps that I took. What you're really listening for is, how do you know that you're right?
Yeah.
So like what I'm listening for when I hear my daughter or my son explain it to me, like, how do you know you're right, is they can tell me in more than one way. Okay. So, or they can break it down into smaller chunks and like, well, for example, 20 times 19, right? How do you know you're right? Well, 20 times 20 is 400 and my answer is less than 400, so I'm right. Things like that. Not I multiplied the 20 times the 10, not that. That's not what I'm looking for.
Interesting.
Like, I need to know how to do the procedure. Tell me how you know you're right. Oh, and by the way, 15 times 15 is 225, and it's got to be in between those two. So I got a pretty good idea that I'm right.
Interesting. I like that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah. So here's the last three: communications, connections, and representations.
Okay.
What type of coaching could you give parents around those three kind of big terms?
So the communication piece of NCTM, right, is listening to others' explanations, right, and then developing your own understandings. So one of the things that I try and get teachers to do, and I think parents can do this too, and I think it's really applicable for parents, especially if they didn't learn math in the ways that their students are coming home with math, is try and connect how your learning of mathematics is connected to what your students are learning in mathematics. So the distributive property is a huge mathematical property, and Common Core and Texas and some of the other states have broken it down. And in layman's terms, I think most parents would probably call it a box method, right? And it's where they break down, independent pieces of numbers. And I can send you a visual, like, to show you what I'm talking about. But more specifically, it's like multiplying 45 times 8, right? So nowadays they're teaching students that it's not 45 times 8, step 1, step 2, step 3. It's let's see how this really makes sense. So like 40 times 8 and then 5 times 8, and then we add them together.
I see. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that's very different than probably the way the three of us learned, right? Where we lined up the numbers and multiplied 8 times 5, put the 0 down and carried the 4. That's very different, but they're both the same thing. They're both connected. And so if you wanted to encourage higher order thinking, like if you can figure out how your child's learning is connected to how you learned it, and they can do it the other way around, then that would be a really powerful connection. So yeah, so like we're trying to encourage, you know, that connection, right? That it's not, or that communication, right? We want, I'm talking about communication, but they like how we can connect those different ideas, which will also encourage critical thinking. Like one of the highest ways of like having students, like when teachers say that my principal wants me to have higher order thinking in my class. I'm like, well, put student work under the document camera and have other students try and explain what other students did. It's the same thing with parents, right? So once you can explain what your kid's doing and how it's connected to what you're doing, then, right, then you guys have a common ground. Like you have a common level of, or a common language where you can talk to each other.
That's really good, Jen. I you know, parents having the tools that you're describing that you're coaching teachers to develop. I mean, I can imagine the kid who says, you know, I can't do this. The earlier conversation you said about you're just not there yet, right? Look at how far you've come so far, right? That's great advice. And then now the question of how do you know you're right? And even putting up the way that mom might solve a math problem and asking the child to explain how she got that problem correct, or right. That's kind of what you're getting at here. It's a question and answering. It's an understanding rather than just knowing how to get the right answer.
For sure.
Yeah. Interesting. Cool.
So just real quickly,
sure.
Help parents understand the term connection and representation. How are those different when you start talking about math and general problem solving?
Okay. Okay. So for connection, I think the most important thing for parents and for, you know, new teachers to know is that math is not separate strands of, you know, an independent idea. Math is connected K16. All of it goes together. You don't take algebra, learn algebra, forget it, and then take geometry, right? They're integrated together. You don't learn how to tell time in the second grade and then forget how to tell time, right? And, you know, time is actually really powerful for learning fractions. Like it's all connected. And that's what they mean. When they say connection is to see math as not a separated activity, right? And there's math in social studies. There's math in literacy. There's math in economics. Like it's everywhere. Yeah. It's not just in, you know, math not just class. In between disciplines, but within disciplines everywhere.
Right.
I talk to teachers all the time and parents. Math is about context and experiences. The more context you put in front of students, the better they get at it, and the better they get at seeing those connections within the discipline and outside of the discipline. So context is key. All the context.
So would as a mathematician, would you agree with that practice makes perfect? That the way that you become a more perfect mathematics user is practice? It's
a good question.
I think I would say the more experiences you have, the more efficient you become. So if you were to talk to your kids about, like when we talked about 45 times 8, right? sometimes it's more efficient for me to break a number into two pieces and multiply it. And sometimes it's more efficient for me to put it in my calculator. And
Wow.
sometimes,
Wow. Whoa.
yeah. Oh, don't go there. Don't get in the weeds with the calculator conversation.
No, Jennifer. Calculators are cheating.
Yeah.
That's how Matt and I were raised.
Right.
Okay.
Oh,
you can put that calculator away.
Yeah. That's the idea of that is just, it's hard for me to even hear.
No, but something you said earlier is so important, and that is, so parents, don't be like Matt and Scott, right?
Amen.
Math has changed, right? The way kids, work on math, the equipment that they employ to help them work on math, all of this has changed, right, Jen?
Well, it has, and I think the calculators are an important tool. Maybe perhaps not when they're first learning, especially operations with numbers, but it is a very powerful visual, especially for mathematics later, like especially in secondary for sure. But there are powerful tools, and I guess this is another one of those things that I would coach parents on. It was specific to the calculator is. Don't give it away so soon.
What do you mean?
Like parents and teachers, like when you ask a question of your young learner, don't give away the answer.
Don't give the answer so soon.
Struggle is good.
So soon. Like the struggle is how you actually get better. If I just tell you the answer, then it's really hard for me to think that I was successful at that task. I got the answer.
All right.
But I didn't really get it all by myself.
All right, Jen. Now we're gonna have some conversations, some real conversations now. All right. So
okay.
A moment ago you said that using a calculator is okay. I was taught that if you use a calculator, you may not understand what it is you're doing. You're just pressing the numbers. So now argue about why it makes sense, and then before you finish, I want you to also argue about why going to Google is not something that kids should do, or is it?
So, okay, let me be really clear. So I want kids to have a calculator, but I want them to have a genuine understanding of why the calculator works before I give it to them.
Yeah.
Which means that like I'm not gonna have you put 45 times 8 into the calculator before you know what that really means.
Yeah.
So, and I would argue that, a lot of teachers introduce a calculator or even introduce an algorithm perhaps too quickly, right? Without, a genuine understanding of why things work. I used to teach algebra, and some of the most powerful visuals that I ever taught came from the calculator because I could graph lines. I could graph 100 lines during class instead of 4 or 5 by hand. But you have to also recognize that I graphed 4 or 5 by hand yesterday, and I took it really slow and explained to the students, this process. And then the next day, okay, remember when we did that graphing stuff? We went through this. Here, let me show you, 50 different examples on the calculator. Yeah. So that tool is really powerful. And I understand why your teachers would have said that was cheating in elementary school, because it probably is. It definitely is. And, I definitely want students to know why things work before they can put it in. So,
Scott, so would it be safe to say that a calculator is like any other tool, and that is learn how to use it before you use it?
Absolutely. All tools make mistakes. Calculators make mistakes. If you input the information incorrectly or you don't know how to properly use it, it will give you an incorrect answer. Remember when I was saying, explaining to Matt, how do you know you're right? So how do I know 20 times 19 is right? Because it's really close to 20 times 20. Yeah. What if I put 190 times 20 and it gave me back an answer in the calculator? Would I even know if it was wrong?
Right.
If I'm just mindless pushing it in, I don't really know if it's wrong. But I don't even know if I made a mistake in the input.
Yeah.
Right. See, this is huge, right? So one of the struggles I've seen with some of the families that I've worked with is their kids, the only thing they know is how to punch numbers into the calculator. Or now they can go to Google and put whole questions in and get Google to spit an answer out. And they haven't the foggiest idea of what just took place. So they're not problem solving. They're letting the computer solve a problem, and they have no idea whether or not it's accurate, how they got to that problem or that answer, the implications thereof. Tell me, how do we now put this a little bit into a box? How would a parent operate knowing that their child could, put any question they get on any test into Google and get an answer? What do we do about that?
That's a really good question, Matt. So I think the mindset piece that we talked about for creating problem solvers, like you're not there yet. Like we're trying to encourage persistence and resilience in our students. And I can't encourage persistence and resilience if they can just go to Google and put in the answer. There's also apps on your phone that solve whole equations for you.
Sure. Yeah.
Calculus, differential equations, like they'll just do it really quickly for you. I would say that it's the analyzation of the answer. So like if you're looking at a graph, like one of the things that you can do that's really easy with your students is every day USA Today puts a graph on the front page of their paper. All you have to do is ask your students, what does this graph mean? Like it's showing you numbers. It's showing you numbers, but what are they trying to tell you? Like all graphs tell you a story, all of them. Whether it's fiction or fact, they tell you a story. And so it's your job to interpret, is it fact or fiction, right? What's the story?
That's a great idea.
Yeah, you should totally, you should check it out.
By the way, I want everyone to know on this podcast that every math problem that Jen has thrown out, I've gotten the right answer. So
that's all that matters.
Everything that she's I just haven't shared because I didn't want to be a show off. All right, Jennifer. Yeah. So let's move on.
Okay, well that was the segue into the last one, which was representation. Because you'd asked me about the last process standard from NCTM, and that's representation. Yeah. So any picture, table, spreadsheet, display, like any of those things are definitely ways to represent a mathematical idea and tell you a story with a quantitative analysis. So anything that you can put a number on, you can tell a story with a representation. And that's what they're talking about in for NCTM. And that's why I was saying, like, if you can read a graph, right, and be able to analyze the results, just like any kind of story, right? Like, how do you know that your source is credible? Like, where did it come from? Who wrote it? Right? Is this person, is it coming from USA Today? Is it coming from, the CDC? Is it coming from, the government? Where's the information coming from? And is it accurate? And did they capture the story correctly?
Yeah. Okay, let's move on. I am writing a blog. This week, you might not know this, but Matt and I have taken it upon ourselves to upskill parents to help at home get their kids to be smarter and stronger, to use Tom Monahan's language there at A+ Challenge. Shout out to Tom Monahan. So as I was writing this blog, and I'm not writing a mathematical side of this whole idea of problem solving. I'm looking more at the scientific and the social studies piece of this whole problem solving pursuit. And I came upon something called the art of observation, which I think really speaks to both science and social studies. I wanted your reaction as a mathematical leader, whether these descriptors sort of fit into mathematical problem solving. And here they are. So the art of observation, this is some work that came out of the Museum of Fine Arts at Houston and also the Baylor College of Medicine. It's kind of a neat story. They ask all their medical students to come over to take a look at art. within the museum. And they asked them to look through these four lenses. And here they are: looking, describing, thinking, and connecting. So I think I've made pretty good sense of all four of those towards science and social studies in my blog. But in this podcast, I would be remiss if I didn't take advantage of you being with us. Do those descriptors speak to you as a mathematics person? And if they do, why?
Well, I mean, connecting for sure. We just talked about how mathematics is connected across disciplines and within disciplines. And so if you can definitely see math and art everywhere. I mean, I'm hoping that some of those Baylor College of Medicine students could see the golden ratio in some of that artwork. And even if they couldn't see it, there's a pattern, right? And there's patterns, and I'm hoping that young mathematicians develop that pattern recognition as well, for sure.
Yes.
So like looking at things and being able to recognize a pattern is definitely a skill that you can cultivate within mathematics education. But you can do that with your students everywhere. Like as a parent, you can always, if you can see a pattern, maybe they can see it too. Sometimes your students will see patterns that you don't see, for sure.
Yeah.
Like they're all wearing red. You can play a game. There's lots of different games. I used to give my kids like 4 cards. Tell me which one doesn't belong and why. There are no wrong answers to this game, by the way. Like they just don't belong because of what you're observing. So that would go towards observation. What do you see? Right? What do you see? What do you notice? What are you wondering about? I'm kind of curious. I haven't been to the Museum of Fine Arts in a minute. Like I need to go back.
Well, this is
and I want you to notice that Matt is crazily taking notes.
Oh yeah,
he's stealing everything that you're saying on this podcast, and I feel really sorry for his kids because tomorrow morning there is going to be problem solving according to Jen Mascheck 101.
Yes,
at the kitchen table in the Barnes household.
That's right. I heard, and let me review some of the things I'm going to be covering. I'm going to shame them when they haven't gotten the answer correct.
Oh my God.
No, but let me just summarize because we're running out of time here. But Jen, you've hit on some really important points that I think parents really need to hear. One is this idea of having the right language when they're dealing with math. You're not there. Look how far you've come. Hugely important. The second one, though, you just said it about looking at different graphs and asking your children to describe the graph. What is it telling you? What is it not telling you? What is another way you could present the same information to tell a different story? That is really, really, really important stuff in today's world when data now is becoming manipulated in all sorts of ways to achieve a specific end. I love the idea of asking questions like, where's the math in this setting, this artwork? Which things don't belong here? Looking at patterns, and
sure.
those are all terrific. And then the one that the concept that I am going to make sure I talk about to my family and every other parent I talk to is that math is about creating problem solvers. And so the idea of Google or these different tools that are available, if you're getting an answer but you're not understanding how you just solve the problem, you actually might be in trouble. And so a problem solver knows how they just solve the problem. They understand it. And so I really appreciate this. We're gonna link people to mindsetworks.com. And I'm also going to mention a program called The Art of Problem Solving. Jen, have you ever heard that?
I don't think, is it?
It's an online math program. They've got different peripherals as well. You may want to take a look. My kids have done it. It's terrific because it really is all about solving problems. So, Scott, any last questions for Jen?
Yeah. So that's a good summary, Matt. Thanks for that. But I want Jen to have the last word. So, is there any other piece of advice? I'm a parent. I'm sitting in my apartment. I've got my 2 kids at home. I'm trying to work. but I want to make sure that I'm doing my due diligence, helping them figure out how to be better at problem solving. Any other type of advice, one or two tidbits that you could share with those parents to make that more of a possibility?
Be patient. Be really patient. The way that, especially if you're in my demographic, like my, not demographic, my age group, if you're like 35 to 45 or older, you've probably learned math in a very specific way, and you may or may not understand the different kinds of strategies that are coming home. Be patient and really try and connect the idea that is coming home to what you already know, because it's the same math. There's no old math, there's no new math. It's all the same math. I promise you, it's all connected. And that, understanding that it's all the same, and just knowing that it's being presented in a different way for students to understand and not just be able to put things into Google, is really important for their progress, to increase their perseverance and resilience, and definitely for learning any kind of discipline, not just mathematics.
Right. Very good.
Jen Mascheck, thank you so much. This has been an excellent session. I got to tell you, I was kind of high anxiety, talking about math and problem solving, but you really helped me get through the 40 minutes.
Yes.
Deep breaths.
I can breathe now. I can breathe now.
That's right.
Because
I thought maybe she was going to give us a test.
I thought there would be no math in this test. That's usually what I say at the beginning of every test. Jen, thanks for
say hello to everybody over at our friends at Houston A Plus Challenge. You're doing really good work with all the school children and teachers in the greater Houston area.
Hugely important.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jen.
Another great interview, Scott. The things I mentioned, some of the things that really resonated with me, but there's another one which is just the importance of real world math and how rare it seems that students get access to the real world math, like the USA Today graphs. That to me is a genius idea. I'm going to definitely do that with my kids. So
yeah, daily practice.
Yeah.
So off air, I wish we could have caught this on the interview, but I asked Jen. I said, she's been in thousands of classrooms, and I said, so how many kids do you think have serious math anxiety? You know what her number was? 50%.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and I told you.
Wow.
I mentioned how most of the families I've talked to.
Yeah, you weren't surprised by that.
No, I wasn't.
Yeah.
In fact, it a lot of it depends on what classroom you're in, of course. But the families I've talked to, the kids are behind in reading, but they're afraid of math. Right.
Yeah.
The barriers to math are very, very high, and I think I think a good chunk of that is this issue that she brought up. They don't understand it. They're cranking out, following the steps, but they have no understanding of really what's actually happening. And some of the things that Jen talked about, I think, are great ways to help a parent make sure the kids are understanding it. So
yeah. Good show, good guest, man.
Yep, definitely. Okay, so Dr. Scott and I want to personally thank all of you for taking the time to listen to the show today. The education game exists to build a world in which parents and their families can reclaim the leadership of their children, and so their children can become self-directed learners, independent, self-directed learners. This doesn't happen by accident. It requires intentionality and support and a ton of encouragement. I almost said discouragement, Scott. A ton of encouragement, as Jen described. And so, Dr. Scott and I want to help you on this journey. We're building an online course to help you navigate this new world of learning. And if you're interested in learning more, definitely go to theeducationgame.com and sign up or tune into our next webinar, which is coming out every week or two. We also have a course that we're starting up, and you can contact us to participate in the course. The course is going to be built on developing a community of parents and young learners who are working collaboratively towards learning independence. So thanks again for our supporters at Patreon, patreon.com/theeducationgame. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast. And this is Matt and Dr. Scott thanking you again for your participation. We will see you right here on The Education Game next time. Thanks.
See you, everybody.